lost and outgunned. No one knows why. People are getting desperate. Not me. I'm here to...
Modern, particularly Western design wisdom often discourages developers from taking power away from players. The prevailing theory goes that removing a user's control dilutes the impact of the events on screen. A non-interactive cutscene can sell the threat of an enemy encounter, but won't always carry the anxious weight and excitement that throwing that same player into that same encounter directly would. But a strictly interactive approach doesn't always permit the developer the same level of storytelling precision as they would have with a short cutscene. During the last few console generations, it seemed we had figured out a balance, placing fully rendered character models between sheets of convenient glass or locked windowed doorways, teasing us with their machinations just inches away, all the while still permitting the player to jump and move around as they please. Theoretically, at least. This design half-measure is rarely satisfying. Most gamers can recall a moment where they just got bored of an unskippable monologue, ignoring the exposition and playing around with the gaps in design logic instead. The most talkative NPCs usually end up delivering their manifesto to the square foot of empty air where the player stood 2 minutes ago, all the while the actual player crouches down and rolls around the limited immediate walking area until the game decides to grant full control back. So should you find yourself designing a game with a few things to say on power and emasculation, how do you convey those themes to your audience in an interactive medium without losing their interest? No game has yet to perfect a thematic usurping of player control, but the closest we may have gotten so far is a meeting of Nazis and photographs. MachineGames' surprisingly excellent reboot of the Wolfenstein series, subtitled The New Order, brought with it one hell of a domineering villainess. The New Order brings about an alternate history timeline with an Axis victory in World War II. After a decade and a half in a coma, franchise lead BJ Blazkowicz travels across Nazi-controlled Europe, eventually boarding a train to Berlin. Our particular scene of interest opens with Blazkowicz placing a pair of coffee cups on a tray. Before he can leave the dining car and return to his cabin, two high-ranking Nazi officers enter with their heavily armed guard. A disgruntled guard stands in the way of Blazkowicz's rear exit, and as the player passes the table where the officials are sitting, a woman's voice states that BJ will place his tray on the table. Not asking politely, not even giving us a courtesy, "would you kindly," but matter-of-factly, ordering us to. A machine gun-toting robot sidesteps between the player and their only remaining exit. We cannot progress until we acquiesce to the woman's demands. Placing our tray down, this elder officer grabs our arm and examines our Aryan features closely. Her effeminate male companion plaintively agrees with her ultimately positive assessment. We are now sharing a table with, say it with me kids, Obersturmbannfuhrer Frau Engel, and her boy toy simply known as Bubby. Frau Engel, whose very frustrating to pronounce rank I probably just mangled right now, is a senior unit commander in the SS, and she has a test for us. According to Engel, the test draws out evidence of any impure blood running through the subject's veins. She lays out 3 pairs of cards before the player, who must choose which one of each pair they are more emotionally drawn to. We are permitted to act on 3 choices, one of sexual attraction, one of happiness, and one of disgust. Throughout the test, a handgun that Engel loaded and placed barrel first before BJ will lead to death. Right after the player makes their final selection, Engel once again grabs BJ's arm and reminds him to choose carefully. Regardless of which picture we then select, the senior SS officer will pick up the gun and point it at the player. Bubby finally interrupts, revealing the charade. If BJ had been of impure blood, according to Engel, he would have just gone for the gun. The photos are shots from a vacation, pointless and unrelated. We are free to go. Taking part in an ultimately fruitless personality test does nothing in terms of gameplay progression. We unlock no new weapons, we gain no new special abilities. We don't even learn any plot-relevant information beyond Engel and Booby's introduction. At the end of the game's prologue, another game villain presents BJ and the player with a similar binary choice, this one with major ramifications in the story. So why does this instance not have a similar gameplay payoff? If our actions don't have consequences over the course of the scene, why is it even playable? One thing is clear, the developers want us to hate Frau Engel, and what better way to make that happen than for her to mechanically strip us of our power just for a laugh. Themes of masculinity and power agency permeate the New Order, but our meeting with Frau Engel begins the most interactive discussion of power dynamics in the game. Engel introduces herself with an order, physically invades our space by getting up in BJ's face in our camera perspective, and locks our progress until we appease her. Her control in this scene is absolute, the player only able to move the camera in a limited field of view for the majority of the scene. The only times we are able to execute any true control inputs are at her express approval. We cannot select a card from a pair Engel puts down until she permits us to do so. She even resets the third choice we make in the personality test, making her one of the rare video game characters to outright disregard the player's agency. Whenever she is setting cards on the table or speaking to us, Engel outright ignores Booby, because we are, in this moment, Engel's preferred plaything, with even less agency than her manservant, and she revels in her control over us. The card personality test is the only time the player meets Engel under these gameplay conditions, and the developers utilized it to build toward a later payoff. Her ultimate fate is more visceral and cathartic because she forced us as players into a rare position of weakness. Engel takes our power here, so that we can have much more satisfaction taking it back later. For all of the new emergent, evocative, and environmental methods we are discovering in modern video game storytelling, agency removal might be the most powerful, especially if it is both removed temporarily and only partially. Designers can restrict movement while players are walking in water, cut to white when we are blinded by a flash grenade, and of course, make us slower, ever so slower, while over-encumbered. So why not use these same systematic interactions more for in-game storytelling? We have already successfully tied momentary gameplay restrictions to boss battles and environments, so why not dialogue? Why not have a romance interest that outright breaks up with a player if they get too clingy and talk to them too many times between missions? Why not have a shopkeeper that outright refuses to sell us beer if we already depleted their inventory of it earlier that same in-game day? Games are in a wholly unique place when it comes to the nature of power and narrative agency. The more developers experiment with that interplay, the more we can experience stories in ways only possible in video games.